I'm Dr. Michelle Bentley, and I'm Reader in International Relations at Royal Holloway, University of London, where I'm also Director of the Centre for International Security. And my current research is about biological warfare. We don't like biological weapons. We don't like them a lot, to the extent that these arms have never really been used. And I'm interested in why. Why do we find these weapons so repulsive and so offensive? The answer is that there's a taboo around these weapons. If you've read 50 Shades of Grey, you'll have a good idea of what I mean when I talk about taboos. And in terms of biological weapons, it's the idea that these arms are so abhorrent, so disgusting, so immoral that we shouldn't use them or even allow them to exist. And this can be an apocalyptic understanding. A pandemic is the end of days, the destruction of all humans. And it's a biblical type of destruction. You don't get much more biblical than a plague. You only have to open your Bible at Exodus to see what I'm talking about. But what this paper is really about is how that taboo gets used strategically in political rhetoric. The way in which this same abhorrence, disgust, and moral judgment is used rhetorically by self-interested actors to shape what happens in politics. And I look specifically at communist allegations made around 1951 to 1953 that the United States had used biological weapons during the Korean War. It's now widely accepted that these allegations were false, and the US dismissed them right away as propaganda. But there are two interesting points here about what the rhetoric around these allegations was trying to do. First, that biological warfare is so effective as a political weapon. The communists were trying to undermine the US, and the allegation that you would use biological weapons was enough to do this. And of course, here we have very clear parallels with Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction and the way in which the 2003 Iraq invasion was justified. But there's a second point, that rhetorical references to taboo weapons can also help you undermine your opponent on the basis of apocalyptic references to morality. Using such destructive weapons is morally wrong, and it's this idea that the communists are getting at. So, for example, in June 1952, an article appears in Pravda which said that the US had, quote, used the criminal methods of mass homicide condemned by all honest men. And what the communists are doing is trying to disparage the political character of the US. It's not simply the idea that the US would use big, nasty weapons, but where that willingness expressed something negative about what they were, their morality and their character. And the US does the same thing. In return, they attacked the communists by arguing that the Ruskies also wanted to use biological weapons to apocalyptic ends. So it's that same demonization of the other on the basis of using or wanting to use a destructive and immoral weapon. But interestingly, the US also condemned the communists for even making the accusation of biological warfare. Biological warfare is so disgusting and so immoral that even making that accusation against another state is so disparaging as to be depraved itself if that allegation is false. And in both cases, this immorality was used to present the communists as uncivilized. It's an attack on communist philosophy. So this paper demonstrates that both sides in the Cold War rhetorically exploited the apocalyptic destruction associated with germ warfare. In a case where there actually was no solid evidence of biological weapons use or not, actors instead attacked each other on the basis of the immorality of their supposed actions, where the willingness to engage in or make allegations of apocalyptic destruction were at the heart of that strategy, and that they drew on moral perceptions associated with apocalyptic weapons to demonize the other and to promote their own ideological and political position within the Cold War.